Can you kind of give us a rundown of like the phases of selection in 2008? I don't know if it's changed or not since then, but
Yeah, so it's been pretty standardized. So you have a 21-day selection course out at Camp McCall here at Fort Bragg. First week is admin week, so you'll do all your physical gates, your PT tests, your time runs, your time rucks. Once that's done, the guys that pass are going to the second week, which is a week long land navigation exercises to where you're conducting 2 or 3 PEs a day, one in the morning, one at night, and then that'll end with a 10-hour land nav exam where you're navigating approximately 40 to 50 miles from all these different points. And then the third week is what we call team week, where you get broken down into 12 to 14 man teams, and then you're conducting team events, just moving a bunch of heavy crap around the Camp McCall area. And then once that's done, if you have what it takes, you'll get selected. And then once you're selected, you'll go back to your unit, clear, and then you'll come back up here for the qualification course.
when you're going through team week, I feel like that's a moment where you start to see. I mean, at this point, you're a couple weeks into it. Everyone's beat up. Everyone's probably a little tired and stuff like that. I feel like that's where you're going to start seeing like the ability of people to deal with other people. You know what I'm saying? Like how much stress can you deal with? Because there's personalities probably. Because everything else is an individual events up to this point, right?
Correct, correct. And that's what teamwork is designed to do. And when I speak to guys on my YouTube channel over at Green Beret Chronicles, like I'll break it down for them and make sure they understand that, hey, by the time you get to the third week, all your physical stamina, all your being in shape, all your mental strength, like you've been stripped of all of that. The intent behind Team Week is to strip you of everything that makes you who you are, and then get to the core of your being, right? That's where you're going to be hungry, you're going to be tired, you're going to be weak, and that's where the true nature comes out, right? It's like if you think of onions, like you'll keep peeling it back to get to the core of it, and that's what those two previous phases will do, to the point where team week guys are gonna, shout, they're gonna fight, they're gonna bicker, and that's what they're looking for. They're looking for the qualities that come out when guys are literally are operating on steam, right? And that has the ability to, either get you selected or not selected.
What of that 21 day cycle? What causes most people to drop?
Land nav.
Land nav. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's because a lot of guys can't operate at night. And because you got to think about it, like if you, because if you look at all the selection processes across the DoD, like there's some sort of land nav factored into it, whether it's on land, underwater, like there's land nav in all of it. And when you start to think of it or think about it, land nav it's not just a technical skills that people have to be able to conduct. It's also a tool that is used to assess leadership, right? Because if you can lead yourself, then you can lead others, right? So if I'm given a map, a compass, a protractor, and a couple of grids, and I can lead myself from point A to point B and do it when no one else is looking, right? Have the discipline, have the personal accountability, the character to do everything that I'm supposed to do and not deviate and not slack off and not do anything messed up, then more than likely, cadre is going to see that as them having, what they're looking for, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a leadership trait also that they're being assessed on. Your ability to lead yourself and do the right thing when no one's looking, right? So that's why if you look across the DoD, like all the selection processes, like whether it's SEALs, MARSOC, SF, combat controllers, like they all have land navigation baked into them. And it's because they want to assess your ability to lead yourself when you're by yourself.
Yeah.
right? I don't know if that makes any sense.
No. That makes perfect sense. I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, you can't accomplish a mission if you can't get there. You know,
Exactly.
that's step
Right.
one. Step one is getting there. Um, yeah, it's a challenge. It's like I said, for people, and there's different ways to do it. Also, you know, there's land nav on foot, there's land nav in vehicles, there's land nav in urban terrain, there's land nav in mountainous terrain. Like, they all have their different kind of pros and cons, I guess, about doing each one. There's difficulties with each one. Um, Following that, you get into Q course. Now, at this point, this is still you haven't been given your specialty yet, right? Is that at the end
Yeah.
of Q
So,
course or
yeah. So once you graduate selection, then you'll get your language, and then you'll get your specialty.
okay?
Yeah. Which I ended up with Fringe, and then I ended up with 18 Charlie, which is the Special Forces engineer. Which all that is the special operation version of what I was doing before as a combat engineer.
Yeah. So did you want that, or did you want to branch into something different?
No, that's what I wanted.
How different was the Special Forces engineer training from what you got from Big Army?
Well, the big army training was more landmines. It was all concertina wire. Uh, it's like night and day, as opposed to the special forces engineer. You have 8 different MOSs wrapped up in one,
Mm.
right? So it was like night and day. So I was in SF. I was the demolition guy, right? So if I need to blow up a building, if I need to breach a door, if I need to clear a airstrip, like everything demolition, because you figure on a special forces ODA, the ODA is built to be self-sustaining. So they build each one of those MOSs with 8 to 9 additional MOSs built into it to make sure that we're self-sustaining.
Mm-hmm.
So as a 18 Charlie, I was the demo guy. I was the EOD guy. I was the supply guy, right? So I did all those jobs all wrapped into one, as opposed to Big Army. I'm just a combat engineer,
Yeah.
right? There's a bunch of other MOSs that, like your heavy equipment guys, your construction guys, those are all different MOSs. As opposed to SF, it's all wrapped in one. And on top of that, I'm still a shooter. I'm a planer. I'm all of that too.
Yeah, that's the intensity of it, right? You have to be, you're a one-man show, you know? That's why that was for the MARSOC JTAX, that was something that the screeners would always, you know, kind of make you aware of. Like, hey man, when you go down range, it's you. You know, there's no other there's not an air officer, there's no other fellow JTAX for you to lean on if you don't understand something or know how to do something. Like, you are the guy. You have to be the guy. Like, there's no one else here. And which is I think is an intense assignment, right? Being the guy, you know, like, you're the only one that can do this. But it's also, I think, an empowering thing for a lot of people, because then you're like, well, I don't want to fail. I want to be the guy. Nobody wants to show up and fail, you know, especially when you're talking about a team, a special forces team, something like that. Like, you want to show up and be an asset here, not someone that's, you know, holding the team back. So I imagine with a job like engineering, when you have so many aspects to that, the learning is just nonstop. How do you maintain? Do you try when you're doing something like that with so many job fields that are technical? You know, you're doing so many jobs that are technical within that. Do you try to maintain like a wave top understanding of everything and then deep dive into specifics as needed? Or, I mean, how does that work for you?
I mean, the school itself is set up in modules. So you got to pass certain modules before you can move on.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was going through training, I just focused on whatever module I was in. And then once I passed that, I moved on to the next one. Right. And then once I got to my team, then I had all my books with me to where if I'm executing and I, need to reference something, I just go back to my books. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you definitely have to have a strategy while you're going through the schoolhouse. It's one of those things, you learn it, you stash it until you need it. And then so you can focus on the next module, because if you fail a module, then you're not moving forward. You have to demonstrate your ability to conduct that task before you move on to the next phase of training, because it's all module phases, whatever you want to call it. And as pass certain one, then you move up to the next one until you're done with the entire course. And then once you get to your team, all this stuff that you learned and you thought that's what you were going to do, that's once you get to your team, you learn, hey, that's just the basics. Now you actually have to learn the advanced stuff on how to be an actual SF guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole nother learning curve within itself.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. It's just, it's crazy how there's not more guys that don't get burned out from that, because that constant having to be better at something. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
It takes a different individual to go towards that route, right? It's not just for anybody. And the guys that are in it, they were selected and they were chosen for a reason, right? And all the screening and everything that goes into place is to make sure that the right guy makes it through that can handle all of those things that he's going to get thrown at him, right? So again, the selection rate is pretty low, and the guys that do make it through, then they have what it takes to be able to handle all the workload that's going to get thrown at them.
What would you say is the hardest part about Q course? What part of it, what was hardest for you, and which portion of it causes most guys to get dropped?
The hardest for me was probably a small unit tactics, which is the first phase of the qualification course. And it was for me because I didn't come from an infantry background. So I had to learn how to patrol, how to conduct raids, and how to conduct ambushes. So that was probably the hardest part for me. And I had to learn how to do op orders and all of that stuff. But once I learned that, I was fine. But that's what gets a lot of guys is probably the first phase of it, because it's a culture shock that they have to adjust to, right? And some of them can't, and some of them can. I was fortunate enough to go through it, but there was a lot of guys that failed that first initial phase and got kicked back to Big Army. Mm-hmm. At least from my experience, it was that first initial phase.
Yeah. When you get to the end, you get to the Robin Sage event, what's going through your mind? Are you thinking at any point man, I'm almost done, hey, we're getting, or is it just grind?
Yeah, so it's one of those things it gets beat into you while you're going through the course, because the course is a year long. So it gets beat into you that, hey, you're always being assessed. You're always being assessed. You're always being assessed. So that stuck with me. That sticks with most guys, and it keeps you honest. It keeps you on track of never letting your guard down. So while I was at Robin Sage, it was one of those same. It was the same thing. Hey, I'm always being assessed, and it wasn't over until it was over, right? Mm-hmm. Even graduation day, it's hey, you're still being assessed, because it's not uncommon to hear of somebody doing something stupid that night, whether it's going out and getting a DUI because they're celebrating, and they don't get to walk across that stage and get their beret and their tab. So it's one of those things. Hey, you're always being assessed. You're always being assessed until you get your beret, you get your tab, and you're en route to your operational group. So even at stage, I was still in the mindset of, hey, this could end at any minute. Stay focused, get the job done, and then when you're done, you're done.
Yeah, man. Well, one, that would be just devastating to get through everything and then do something stupid at the last day and freaking throw it all away. That would be, man. I bet there's some guys that have done that just continue to kick themselves for years after something like that happening. Two, does the assessment ever stop though? The reality is once you get to your unit, I kind of feel like you're probably still being not assessed, they're going to cut you at any time, but anything could happen. You got to still be good. It's not like you're done. It's time to step it up to that next level, right?
Yeah, because like I mentioned earlier, even though you graduated, you get your tab and your beret. Now you get to the operational group where you realize that everybody has a tab and everybody has a beret. And now you have to prove yourself all over again, mm-hmm. right? So no, it never truly stops, right? Because you're always being assessed now by your team sergeant, by your teammates, by your company commander. You're always being assessed as the new guy now to see if you can, to see if you have what it takes to actually wear that beret, right? Yeah, you earned it, but can you actually keep it?